And I'm Jack Garber, and Constance Spencer is co-hosting with me from Independence Realty Group. Also joining us tonight is Steve Knight, who is on site at Ruggles Mine. We'll get to him in a few minutes. He's going to give us a quick little overview of this 200-acre site. And Tim Bauman is also with us. Tim is a facilities individual who is very familiar with the facilities at Rogers. One of the reasons that we're producing this presentation is, as real estate agents, we're definitely interested in whether or not, number one, Rogers itself could be purchased and become part of a Free State Group investment and controlled and improved, or do we look, as real estate agents, do we look outside of Rogers to other real estate and other properties that may be available in the state for a future replacement of Rogers, but closer controlled by the Porcfest event and the Free State individuals who are now residents of the state. While I'm talking, Steve is giving you a panoramic view of the Ruggles Mine. I'm going to throw it over to Steve so he can give you a bit of background on Ruggles Mine, 200 acres in Grafton. Steve, why don't you pick up and tell us a little bit about the Ruggles Mine?
Hi guys, I'm Steve. I've been working one-on-one general contracting for many years, building facilities, homes, and I've been heavily involved in dispersed camping. And as part of the family, we saw this opportunity and we had to bring it there. But Ruggles Mine itself is 285 acres currently, across 5 different lots, all in one sale package. So it's got 200 years of history, mining mica, originally identified by the Indians, and garnered the attention of Mr. Ruggles himself, Mr. Ruggles, and his son and him started on a tunnel not too far from me through the trees, about 200 yards away. And eventually, over time, and a couple different mining companies and mining operations, you have what you see in front of me right now. I'm standing towards one end of the mine. This over here is the oldest end of the mine. As you see in that mining, and all the way at the end, you see the iconic column, and that is the main entrance to the mine. So just below it, there's a couple smaller tunnels. We have an underground tunneled pond from natural water coming out of the bedrock. It's a couple of different water features across the property. Some of it's heavily sloped. That means it's steep. Perfect for wild areas, for exploring, for our young people, for those of us that love hiking and mountain biking. I have been exploring this property for a couple of days now. I've put many miles on these boots, and I've been tracking every moment of it, identifying the topographic maps and the LiDAR maps that have been available to us, and putting my eyes and my boots on the ground to take a look at it and see what would this look like as a new home, a new foundation, somewhere where we can invite our community and invite new people to our community and to our state. There's lots of different ideas coming around this. So long and the short of it, I'm excited at this opportunity, that this iconic figure has come up for sale at this point in time. It's just the right time for us.
So
and
Steve,
well,
let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Hold it right there. Constance, you have an aerial view of that. Why don't could you play that aerial? Take quickly for us to take a minute of the aerials. It's just a gorgeous part of the country.
Let me screen share. And say this.
By the way, this property's been for sale for several years. You know that.
Quentin, I
this
think
video-
it was on and off the market. But
This video said it was posted 4 years ago.
Sure, it started at about $1 million, and now I know it's down to 4.
Quentin, can I ask you to hold your questions till we finish just a little bit of the introduction? I know you're anxious to talk about it, but just hold your questions for me, please.
So this isn't very far from where you're standing, right, Steve? Can you see it? You might not be able to see it.
Oh yeah, I can see it. That angle right there is the previous screen is
Mhm.
exactly where I'm standing.
That's what I thought when I saw the mines in the background.
In that really bright spot. So right there on that visible rock outcropping in the center of the screen, I'm immediately to the right of that, just out of the trees right there.
Do you want me to keep going, Jack?
No, that's good enough. I
Okay.
just wanted to get an overview of the property. So
I would love to go down into the mine and show you guys this stuff, but the cell phone signal underground isn't spectacular.
Well, before we go a lot further into the mine aspect of it, the prior owners of the properties, as I understood, for about 50, 60 years, that this was a major tourist attraction in Grafton. And so clearly it's that is an aspect that the people of Grafton are interested in that coming back as to the community, as I understand. Is that right, Steve?
Yeah, there's a significant presence here. There's volunteer work has been offered. These people here in this community would really love to see this facility open to the public again in one capacity or another. I have lots of great ideas, which are probably too scattered for this particular moment in time. But like I said, my main presence here right now is to see if this amazing real estate opportunity is also just as amazing to build our own Porcfest home campground.
And what about some of the other aspects of the property? It's multifaceted, as I understand.
Well, it is. I mean, there are mine tunnels scattered in different places, which for safety reasons over the years have been covered over with some fill. But there is probably, like, I would say at least five different water features that can be adapted, that can be used. I mean, streams, ponds, not just the one in the cave that I mentioned before. But just on this side alone, this particular properties has not been in current use. They've been paying their taxes for a long time. So it is open and ready for us to build a beautiful new home. The hill country, the trees, just the stone features, just as an outdoorsman, as a camper myself, it's something here that makes you smile. It's a beautiful day up here on the mountain. So there's a lot of road infrastructure from the mining days. So it may not look like it right now, but I'm gonna try to give you a shot. Right there, above those tunnels, there's a bunch of trees. Well, if you cut all those trees away, it's a stone bridge and you have a full view all the way out across the valley. And above the column, there's greenery, there's beautiful trees up there that have grown up over the last 20 years since the tourist attraction has been closed.
Some of that we saw
And,
in the aerial shot. Let me ask.
the view of Mount Cardigan from the front parking lot is just awestruck.
Okay. All right. So we know we're getting a little bit about a bit background about that property, and we're going to continue with that property. But I want to get Tim in on this conversation. Tim, if you can if you can tune in your camera, because part of the reason we invited you to this presentation tonight was you've been assisting Porcfest for the last couple of years with the facility itself at Rogers, as I understand. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, but before I did 4 years from 2015 to 2018, then this year as well. Basically trying to work with the Rogers team to, to kind of prop up what they had for facilities and the like.
And so can you give us some of background? I mean, one of the reasons that we're even talking about this is, number one, Rogers itself has been for sale for some period of time. Constance and I, as realtors, have looked into that for various clients and for various other reasons. And obviously, Constance is the coordinator for Porcfest, co-coordinator last year, now coordinator for this coming Porcfest. So what's the importance of us understanding what's going on with the facilities at Rogers?
I think just in terms of, and I'm not certain everyone's perspective on the call in terms of what their background is, but I'll try to do this in a nutshell. Certainly in terms of running a facility that serves the needs of about an event that's about up to 2,000 attendees, we've obviously got some issues. We know that the water supply at Rogers is inadequate. It's really only capable, based on past estimates that I've done, of probably very reliably handling about 1,400 attendees. Once we get up over 1,400, and especially at 2,000, there's simply an issue where we consume more water than the campground can supply, and also the campground probably has a lot of leakage that causes a water loss that just makes it not sustainable. Also, in terms of just general maintenance issues, we know there are any variety of issues that cause problems for individual campsites, issues with their own water hookups, their own electric hookups, etc. And then finally, with Rogers common area facilities, there are concerns with maintenance, including things that are now reaching the point of safety issues. So we're at a point where we know that one way or the other, we're going to have to, for the future of the festival, we're going to have to find either, find an alternative, either, as the two of you have discussed, figuring out a way to purchase and renovate Rogers, or find a site, something like Ruggles being, one of, I'm assuming, many possibilities. But it's, there's Rogers, in terms of just from a on the ground facilities perspective, trying to prop up their restrooms, their infrastructure, their water, their electric, is just a problem from a day-to-day perspective.
And
Yeah, it was over a full-time job for Tim this year.
you did a great job, Tim, because some of us who were there for the full time didn't even know that some of the problems that you were having.
That's good to hear.
You can tell he stays off site, right?
Others, as well, I personally am not privy to the responses from the questionnaires that were sent out about Porcfest 20. Constance,
Yeah,
what was the number one complaint?
Oh, I don't have the data on that yet. We are letting it run until the 21st, and then we're going to look at it. We had some other things that we needed to do, like take a break. But I can tell you from the Facebook feedback that I read, and from the Telegram feedback, that the facilities and the noise were both big issues that people wanted addressed. And the size of Rogers and the closeness of the camping obviously makes the noise issue tough to address unless we put in a lot more strict rules, or we shrink the size of the festival or something along those lines, which I don't think anyone really wants to happen. So that's the that's the only feedback I really have as of yet, because we're gonna put off the surveys until everybody has a chance to fill them out.
Yeah. So without putting you on the spot, Tim, because I don't even think you've been on the Ruggles property, but the concept of looking at another piece of land or another property like Ruggles, or another property that might be in another part of the state, or even close to Lancaster itself, where Rogers is now. The construction of new infrastructure, the building of new infrastructure, is that something that would be accomplishable, or is that just insurmountable task?
And because I come from a kind of a facility operations background instead of a development and construction background, I'm probably not the best person to chime in on that. Certainly, I think any of us can look at a situation and just as kind of novices start grasping some of the challenges. Steve's probably got in terms of ideas and vision. Steve and I may kind of be the opposite ends for anybody who's looking at this. Steve can see the possibilities and the ideas, and I think just from the nature of my job, from a day-to-day operational component, I'm probably going to any site I will find challenges in. Just in general, looking at something like Ruggles, and maybe flipping to Steve afterwards. So after I kind of talk about challenges, he can talk about opportunities. And I think with any site that people would look at, that's what you would need to do. Certainly, you've got versus Rogers, the topography of the land. Just for people who have been at Rogers, there's about a 40-foot elevation gain from the bottom of the campground to the top of the campground. For Ruggles, we're talking about a 340-foot elevation gain. There's more acreage, so there's any development that would be there would be probably a bit more scattered, and there would be private and different zones in it. And there would be it would be a big development effort, certainly, for something like Ruggles to make the vision complete. That being said, and Steve can probably, again, kind of do the bright side of that, but it's an interesting property. But I would think, that there would be a lot of challenges in terms of how do you get the infrastructure in, because it's a lot of elevation gain and a lot of changes. Just for comparison, also, there's about 446 actual camping sites at Rogers. And we've been, now maxing that out in its entirety. So that would be in terms of the size, and Rogers, the developed portion of Rogers is about 50 acres. And I say all of those to give people some perspective of the scope and scale of if it were to be a home for Porcfest, of what we would need. The acreage at Ruggles is much larger, but because some of it, as Steve has mentioned, is steeper terrain and a lot more varied terrain, placing of campsites or small portions of campsites in various areas of the facility would be the way that you'd end up having what we would have to do to reach that type of capacity. And I saw somebody with a chat or a question, and I don't know if Jack, if you're going to be kind of fielding those questions.
I'm going to field that after. I'm going to do questions right after this, but I wanted to give Steve 2 minutes to give us his vision of Ruggles and Porcfest.
All right, 2 minutes, man.
Well,
I think
you can have 3 if you need it.
I need 2 hours. All right, so first things first, I think my main focus in the first couple minutes of being on here was to analyze how to build infrastructure. The biggest thing that I noticed this past year was the water situation, the lack of enough showers, the lack of enough bathrooms. Nobody is in love with a porta potty. So I've already started doing some layout design, actually, placing the roads, placing the pipes, placing the sewer lines. Where do we put this stuff? How do we design it from a CAD perspective? I'm on the ground, comparing CAD to the, obviously, I'm gonna have to make some adjustments. And if we get the opportunity to bring in excavators out here, there will be adjustments made along the way. But what I'm seeing as far as a phase 1 construction is to match and exceed Rogers' current capacity. So I'm looking to see at 500 to 600 campsites just for phase 1. I'm looking to see a municipal size water tank. I've even picked out the hill where this big water tank can be nice and tall so that all of these campsites can have great water pressure. I've ID'd areas in the terrain and in my layout with the existing mining roads as an infrastructure that we can build off of, where shower houses and bath houses can meet the community needs. I've identified areas that look like big thoroughfares so that we can continue the festival presence of Agora Valley and the sales part of the community. I've looked at how things can be together for a festival as well as little pods of community. One area can be more family camping. One area can be more adult camping. They're a couple acres apart. So with the hill structure and a little bit of distance that we can, hopefully avert these noise issues. Push a hot button. They're individual little communities throughout the family of Porcfest itself that kind of deserves their own area to expand and to explore. I've looked at the opportunities of building into cabins that can be rented year round, so that this campground can not just be a home for Porcfest, where you block it off on the calendar and you say the same thing that Rogers says: this property is this event and this event is this time period. But there should be plenty of room for people to come early, for people to come late, for people to stay late. I mean,
All right, Steve, I'm going to cut you off because we only have a couple more minutes before we're going to have to close. And I want to get to some of these questions, and some of them you are answering at this time. And all we're doing is talking about your vision, what you've seen in this property, and you're bringing to the Liberty community, and it would be what you want to be a part of it, as I understand, but you're not buying the property, and you would like to be a part.
I am not. I would love to be a project manager, helping make sure that this place gets built right so that we can enjoy it for decades to come.
Just want to make that clear, because some of the questions, based on the ownership and the owners of the property, they would make the final decision about what aspects of that vision that they may decide to entertain. But I think that what Steve is saying is this would be a campsite. I don't know if it can be a year-round campsite. Certainly, it could have year-round homes on it, like you mentioned. And I would imagine we could have a tiny home community someplace within that 200.
There are, just to pipe in for 2 seconds here, there are specific restrictions. Moreover, there are boxes that need to be checked, and the more year-round buildings, the more year-round residents, the more boxes have to be checked, especially from a water system standpoint. How much water, how frequently it needs to be tested, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And sewerage and things like that. So when I talk about tiny homes, I'm really talking about not the ones on wheels necessarily. Those would go possibly onto the RV sites. I'm talking about the ones that are on plots like we presented at Porcfest this year. So what else do I have here? So it is something, there was a question about whether or not this would be a Liberty community. I think that that's part of the vision that you see. It is a Liberty community, not just a campground, but it is.
My background in successfully running my own personal dispersed camping spaces for the last many years, and building them for other families that are successful, show that the outside community wants to be involved. They want to be here. We want to make this a destination location to make an economic impact on our host community, but we do want it to be a Liberty community. That is one of the primary focuses here.
Right, and so just like now with Rogers, the FSP pays Rogers a fee to host Porcfest at that location. It would be the exact same thing. Quentin, you had a question about that. It's not FSP would not own the property. It would be a private enterprise, like when the Independence Inn, if you're familiar with that, that was one of my ideas, my innovations. And while I own none of it, I was the real estate agent involved in the sale of that property. It is owned by Free Staters, and it is run as a Free State clubhouse and a community location. But it's still a private enterprise. Quentin, you've also asked about cost of updating the infrastructure. We have no idea. No one in this call, we're just real estate agents, and the closest we have is Tim to facilities, and like he said, he's a manager. He's not an engineer or a developer, so we don't know. All of that is due diligence that would have to be performed on the property. Putting development in proximity. Quentin, you also had a question about putting development on property that takes the acreage out of current use. My understanding, Steve mentioned that, and I do have the tax bills on the property. The 5 lots, I'm sorry, it's 5 lots, isn't it, Steve? 5 lots?
Yeah, it's 5 lots where 4 of them are current use, and this one that I'm standing on, the 100-ish acres of the mine itself, is 9 current use. Right. And the town here, the town of Grafton, if nobody's familiar, can definitely be considered to be a liberty and freedom positive community. Right. So the front gate, as we see it at Rogers, anybody can pull up to that front gate and they're 2 feet away from the first vendor. This property, not going to happen. So there's a long private access road. That front gate is a good distance. You're only seeing trees.
And that's one of the things I want to mention is that one of the reasons that Porcfest is so successful in Lancaster is because of the great working relationship with Crosby and the town of Lancaster, and any potential purchase of Rogers Campground or moving it we would then find out how much they enjoy working with Porcfest itself, because we take care of our own people, and how much of it is because they're supporting Lancaster and Rogers Campground. So that's unknowns that would definitely have to be looked into.
Yep.
Okay. Just one other question to cover, and then I'm going to open it up for more questions. And that is, Steve, there was a question about the entrance road. Is the entrance road an easy road? Does that have easy access or good access? Or are there any access issues?
Okay. That's a twofold question, twofold answer. I'm sorry. In its current condition right now, after all of the rain, I enjoy driving a big 4-wheel drive truck. And that's very helpful for a significant portion of the road. My recommendations in my infrastructure plan and the design, the proposal as far as the design work goes to build this campground does involve rebuilding significant portions of the main road so that these really big, beautiful machines that people bring are comfortable and safe.
Well,
So
it seems to me, Steve, if you're going to build 400 or 500 sites for RVs and campers and the like, you're going to have some big equipment on that property. So that's going to be a fairly easy task.
big road coming up. Now, the way that it works, it's a big circular road. So the front portion of the road, it's effectively, if people don't know, it's Route 4 from Concord to Grafton. And then there's like 2 turns and you're on the property. So I want to see the road from the main road to the junction. We have one way in and one way out. So I want to see improvement from the road to that junction. And then the improvements on the road up are less intense, and the improvements on the road out are, oh, they're more intense than the road up.
Also an hour and 15 minutes from Manchester, so it's a lot closer than Lancaster, which
That's for sure.
make it probably about the same for some of the seacoast folks, but for the people on the west side or the southern half of the state, it's
I
lot
also
closer.
see a new mover community where we can help people get here, have a place to stay, have a place to work while they look for professional work and get themselves anchored out in the community.
So I want to open this up. If anybody wants to open their microphones up and ask questions, I will say this, that on this call, we're not going to discuss any aspects of investment or investors. I would like anybody interested in that aspect of this to contact me directly. The property does have a short fuse. We would have enough time for due diligence, but it's a short fuse with regard to making offers on the property. So I would need to have that discussion privately with anybody interested in possibly investing or be a leader in that investment. So with that, if you want to open your mics, Quentin, did you have some questions you want to ask? I've been trying to cover what you had in here.
His last one was about motels or hotels in the nearby, and Tim actually looked this up before our meeting, so maybe you could answer that one, Tim.
Actually, let me do this. The question is, it's not as good as what Rogers has, Quentin. I could pull up a Google map and look, but Rogers has a lot of motels and hotels and a couple of large resorts within about 5 minutes to 30 minutes. The Ruggles area, because it's closer to Manchester, but it's a little bit more remote in terms of other infrastructure, is probably in the neighborhood of 30 minutes plus in terms of substantial number of hotels, motels, and the like. So there's a difference there.
I would love to find a partner like the Independence to actually build one right here.
And another thing is, if the person who buys it puts in cabins, they don't have to be like the Rogers cabins. They could be actually nice cabins.
Cabins, yeah.
That have that have hot water and comfortable beds, and that might eliminate a lot of people wanting to stay off site.
Absolutely. Get numbers from how many people feel like they have to stay off site for comfort reasons.
Once we have the result of the survey, that is a question on the survey of how many people stay off site.
Awesome. Yeah.
Quentin, go ahead. I want Quentin to go ahead and ask some questions.
Well, I was just going to say, my first question was, is the idea to have a community, only a one time a year, setup for Porcfest? And it sounds like it's a business venture for what summer months anyway. So, spring, summer, and fall. So then the question becomes, if it's going to be a campground, I guess, or whatever, a living place, is there something in the area that people would recreate to? Like where I am, it's a recreation area, lots of stuff to do. Would the area sustain something other than Porcfest?
Well, yeah, as a realtor, I can answer a bit of that because I sell a lot of property very close to that, or not a lot, but I've sold quite a bit of property. There's snowmobiling, there's skiing in the winter, there's snowshoeing that people do during the winter. During the summer, there are countless number of trails and hiking and biking areas throughout that whole region. It's a very popular area for free staters. I get a lot of requests for Grafton properties.
Those are owners. Those are owners. I get it. I get it. What I mean is recreators.
Yeah.
People. Okay.
You want to
So
talk
you
about
think-
tourists, right? That there's a couple state parks that are very popular hiking attractions nearby. There is a performance Jeep course, off-road Jeep course, very high class in their circles. There is clubs and places that want access to this property specifically, STEM engineering, mineral related stuff that will pay decent money for access to come up here and camp and mine the tailings piles for a couple days. And part of the reason why I'm looking at it as far as like a whole campground is that to turn it into a destination itself. So it is a freedom, liberty run organization. It is a liberty enhancing, liberty welcoming. It's just drawing people into our family, into our community, saying, look, we're awesome people. You don't need to be afraid of the headlines. And we want to anchor. We want to be, if this tourist attraction reopens, it's going to make headlines on all of the major stations and papers in the area. It's going to be a big deal. So I think it's definitely going to turn into something in and of itself that people want to participate in just to be here. I have a small set of campsites on my 60 acres, and I have people come from New York. They're not coming to the White Mountains. They're coming to see me at my campsite for 3 days. And with all the stuff, I have a pretty simple setup. It's nice, lots of 5-star ratings, but it's simple. We build something even nicer. You build it, they will come.
Yeah. No, this maybe Quentin, I was describing this as a vacation mecca. You can have glamping there. There's many things you could do with that, with a property in that area. And being only an hour and a half from Manchester, as opposed to 2.5 hours from Manchester, makes this even a better transaction.
Jack, is it okay if we spend a little bit more time talking? I know we're over time, but is it possible to talk a little bit more about like other options other than just Ruggles Mine?
Absolutely.
Tim has been working on something that's actually pretty interesting, and I'd like for him to have a chance to talk about it.
And what I'm kind of looking at is just, for lack of a better term, kind of an interim solution. So if we just kind of pull back a little bit to the forest and say, you know, in terms of just Porcfest and just facilities, even one of the folks mentioned, I think in the chat area, you know, they thought we maybe had the water issues resolved because we'd been bringing in water, for example. And that really what has been brought in has been just a very small drop in the bucket to what we're looking at. So one concept that we've been, you know, just toying around with, which could benefit some of the other options, would be the concept of finding a 50-acre open field. This is just kind of imagination and envisioning at this point, to which we basically brought in all utilities, water, power, shower trailers, literally just from the ground up on a temporary basis, found vendors that are capable of basically powering up a large camp for a 7-day event. I'm going to explore that and basically try to find out whether it has any feasible possibilities and what the cost would be. The side benefits of being able to understand something like that and see if we could do that would be, one, if a major issue happens to Rogers before we can find a new, more permanent home for the event, we would be ready to act and do something to keep the event going. Number two, if we can grasp what it would take to bring in those types of temporary facilities and temporary services, we may be able to prop up either Rogers or in a site like Steve has talked about, that would be a longer development curve. Well, if we have the ability to bring in basically temporary utilities, temporary facilities, we could prop up something that's on a longer development horizon. So it's just to mention that we're trying to figure out, we know we have an issue. We know that potentially one way or the other, you know, Rogers may not be available to us just because of the continued issues and you know, no plan of secession in the event that Crosby needs to step down, that type of thing. So I just wanted to mention that we're looking at the possibility that the other benefit potentially of looking at a mobile concept is that if we find that an owner or a town that we deploy that in doesn't work out so well for us one year, we decide to find out that they aren't as welcoming of us as perhaps the Lancaster area or Crosby has been in terms of letting us do what we want, well, then having the ability to run a fully mobile event, we could move it elsewhere. Don't know if it's feasible, but basically we're investigating it. That's the short version.
Well, I don't want to get into a real long one, but I don't know. Jeff, if you could unmute yourself and just tell us what your experience is with Burning Man. Isn't that somewhat similar to that? Don't they bring in the facilities for the Burning Man production?
Yeah, they bring in, it's an event where, I mean, that's why I'm optimistic about our ability to do something and take care of our own infrastructure. I definitely know that the scale that we actually bring it in now is a drop in the bucket, but Burning Man brings in all their water and ships all their own water out. So every drop of shower water is carried out and every bit of drinking water is carried in. And it supports 80,000 people per year. It generally uses outside service providers. So you make agreements for them to come in and make a contract for them to come in and help you bring water in and bring water out before the event. And they do have a pretty mature infrastructure because the event's been running for a long time. But yeah, I could give you details about how much it costs to bring in water. It's pretty expensive.
That kind of answers your question. If they're doing 80,000, we ought to be able to do 3,000.
Yeah. It's 80,000, and there's basically a few companies that have a monopoly, so they can charge quite a bit to carry water in and out. It's like $1 to $2 per gallon. So it's quite expensive.
Thanks.
Wow. So I,
But they can't have, like, obviously every time we're like, why don't we just, at that price, why don't we just start our own water company? Jesus, we could pay for a whole lot if we charge 1 or 2 gallons per water to take it in and out. But yeah, we make it work. Like we set up like evaporitrons to evaporate the water to minimize how much has to be carried out. We do a pretty good job. We're pretty efficient.
Pat, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Are you still there?
Yeah, we're
Can you
all
hear me?
here.
Yep, we can hear you.
Got a phone call at the same time, of course. So are the issues with Rogers just the water?
No, I don't know if you were here in the beginning, but there are.
No, I missed it. I
Okay.
came in late because I was
Okay.
shopping and I was like, his birthday party, I need to get stuff. And I was like, oh, it's 6:30 already. So, yeah.
No, there's major electrical issues. There's some structural issues. There's
Oh,
liability
is that just
issues.
the normal electrical issues that we always face with random spots being not nice?
So the fact that you call them normal kind of
Normal.
answers our own question. Like they're
Yeah.
not normal for campgrounds to have that many sites that don't work. And
Mhm.
obviously the pool was an issue this year. So just various things like that. There was an incident at the motel where a step gave way. So
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
so there's more than just the water situation that would need to be tackled.
Yeah.
The water one, obviously, in terms of having two, we had 2 days where we had complete outages of
Yeah.
the water. We had one restroom, one shower, basically bathroom that was closed most of the week due to electrical issues. So that was shut down. There were issues in terms of tree maintenance around the campsites in terms of issues with trees that should have been removed from the property that were potentially endangering campsites. As Constance mentioned, the other state. Oh, somebody's interjecting. I didn't.
I'm saying there was a whole tree that landed right on top of where somebody's tent was 2 hours earlier.
Right. So there's a host. We've kind of gone now beyond, and I'm trying to speak gently, but we've gone from a point where it's just an issue of availability of facilities in terms of water and availability. Many sites had issues with electric not working at their individual RV sites, so they were plugging into other locations. So it's also gone beyond a simple issue of availability, and also to a point of where there are safety issues cropping up, and there have been some conversations already about how to deal with it next year. In lieu of finding a new home quickly, there have been some conversations about, okay, how do we get the owner to address, safety issues? It's certainly their liability, but whether it's their liability or not, we don't want to be in a situation where, where we're working with someone who's not taking care of things. So we're looking at those angles as well.
So question following up that, we were talking with some of the residents that are long-term campers there, obviously over the summer. And they basically said, and I'm sure this is probably pretty obvious, that we bring in the most income for them and they kind of just keep it floating. And we're the ones that actually kind of make them any kind of like over, breaking even. Would that incentivize him to actually move forward with repairing things?
I think that at this point, it's been covered over and over and over that we have nowhere else to go. Like every time there's a debrief, like people start saying, well, where are you going to go? Where's the room? Where are we going to go? So as of right now, like that probably isn't enough of an incentive because
right. You don't have any
Yeah.
here, I'm gonna go here. It's
yeah,
like,
we
sure
have
you
a
are.
20, we have a 20-year history, and I personally have I've been every single Porcfest since 2013 at Rogers. To me, they're married, Like I'm not having this conversation because I'm the producer and I'm going to immediately make major changes. Like that's not it at all. It's that this wasn't a producer role for me. This was as part of Independence Realty Group. I'm interested in helping connect people and solve problems through real estate. So that's why I'm on the call.
That's right. So Kat, you missed that part at the very beginning. We talked about
I did.
that. Yeah, that this is only looking at something that might work for the future and become just like Independence Inn became an enterprise of Free Staters who own that property now. This is now my next vision is, can we develop a campground, not for this year, not for next year, but for the future? And can we develop a free state land, land that free staters will feel great coming to, whether it's because they want to live in a tiny home, or whether it's because they want to come to Porcfest, or whether they want to be there for a holiday in the summertime or wintertime. So that's kind of what we're trying to discuss here. And what we're looking for is, at this particular point, is there the right people who will come forward? If so, contact me and I can give them a lot more information about this property from a realtor perspective. And Tim, he's looking at a different solution that would take us into a different area at a different point.
Definitely reach out to me or Tim on the production side of 24 if you have suggestions. So
well,
if
part of the reason sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, if you have like a large lot in a friendly town that you think like Tim could use your setup as his map as he's running figures, that would be really helpful, because he's kind of he has no land. He's just looking at a theoretical concept of kind of feasibility. Is it a concept that would work? It's, and we do it. And because I'm a realtor and I love Porcfest, I did look to see what other large tracts of land were for sale in New Hampshire right now. And there aren't a lot, as you could imagine, with the way things are going. So, and then of course you have to, again, like, which towns will be welcoming, which towns will try to block us. And we don't even know that about Grafton. So this is all, the Porcfest aspect of this is very, let's just start a conversation. And then in that starting of the conversation, Steve had this particular opportunity that he's very excited about. So we wanted to give him an opportunity to also showcase that.
Okay, with that, I'm gonna Jeff, do one more question by you. Then I want to wrap up.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Sorry for chiming in at the end.
Oh, that's fine.
One thing, I don't think the only issue is that Rogers is the only land that's available, because the amenities they provide are not something that we really rely on anyway so much. But I think he does a great service for the FSP community because he takes on all the liability. And I'm kind of curious as to how it's even possible to structure something. I mean, as we know, a lot of Free Staters have been raided, and if we had a community, that would probably all be on that liability would probably all be on the owners. And I wonder if, you said there's like 5 different plots, maybe they could be divided, just like, have some kind of, I'm not really sure how it could possibly be structured. Burning Man, for example, is interestingly federal land. So none of the state laws apply, as far as I know. That helps. Not really sure what else.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tim.
Oh, I was actually, Jeff. I'd be curious if you're a resource to talk about Burning Man off outside of this. I'd love to get in touch with you just to give me some concepts and ideas. Again, for me, this is kind of a theoretical exercise, just in just and a potential safety valve for us, so to speak, if we run into issues. But so yeah, it'd be helpful to help build out what types of things I would have to address, like the thing you've just talked about. You seem to have some insights that would be useful to me.
Great, Tim. I'm glad we can make that connection for you. Steve, I want to thank you for putting up with the midges and the black flies that are out there.
Oh, yeah.
Bothering you. You're a real trooper, and you've been marching through the land, and the scenery is absolutely gorgeous there. We really appreciate your knowledge, and I appreciate you bringing this to other liberty-loving people, and let's see what we can do with that. Tim, thank you for joining us, and your insight on facilities at Rogers. And once again, this is in no way meant to be a presentation to suggest that the coordinators of Porcfest are in any way leaving Rogers Campground, and we're just looking at alternatives, and we are looking at one of the alternatives I mentioned is Rogers has been for sale as well. And I would love to find, the right person to step up to the table, and would like to lead the way for purchase of Rogers and fix the ills of the facilities there.
That's what I was going to ask,
Well,
because I heard that too before.
so that is, Kat, contact me, and I give, or Constance, and we can give you some insight based on what we know about it from previous people. But I want to thank everybody for being here. You've been very patient, and we're going to end the call now. We've had an hour when we usually do a half hour.
All right.
So I'm
Thanks,
really,
everyone.
really impressed with everybody's enthusiasm. Thanks, everybody.